Thank you very much.
Hi, Edmund.
Hello.
To call to order the regular Board of Education meeting Tuesday, January 25th at 8:30 p.m. These are 6:30. 6:30. Sorry.
The United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
Dave Adele, Steve Kozer, Mike Russo.
Kelly Castlot. Yep.
Aisha,
Hi, everybody.
are there any amendments to the agenda? So I would like you to, why don't you do the, sure, motion to approve the Board of Education minutes, January 11th, 2022.
Second.
Any changes? Yeah, I have discussion. For board members present, Shelley arrived at 7:05, and Steve, I think it's like 6:45. And then Steve can't be present and absent at the same time. We need to, so we need to take the board member absent out. Yeah, okay. Are you going to send it to Dr. Jones? Yeah, I can send it back. And on the motion to approve the board minutes, I made the motion, but it still needs to be added to the vote count. And then on other action item motions, there's no second listed. I seconded, and we need to add second to the vote count. And I will send these, and it's same as the motion to adjourn. We need to add definitely to that vote count. So I will send this over to Dr. Miller, and you can give them to Kelly.
Yes.
Okay, so obviously we're not going to pass those. So do we just could have complete them as a motion? Okay, and to each different motion. Yeah, I think it's a motion, and then withdraw the motion. I'll withdraw, so Mike seconded it, so he's going to second the withdrawal.
Second to withdraw.
I will make a motion to approve the January 11th Board of Education minutes as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed or abstained?
Same.
Well, either you would or not, you came late. Came a little late.
11.
Yeah. So that.
That was perfect. That was right.
Okay, so then he wasn't.
No, I thought it was making a joke, but no, I wasn't here.
Oh, no, I have you as here and.
You were late.
Here.
Yeah, it's just out.
Oh, got it. Right, you gotta count. Audience of citizens, does anybody wish to address the board? So, board correspondence, information items, budget 22-23. Would you, Robert?
That's me. Okay, so I have a presentation I'm going to share with you tonight. Created version of it. I feel confident I meant to get this to you in advance, but we were working final details up to this afternoon.
We're totally taking out what we have before, is that correct? So take this wall out. and this- Oh, this is the slide. that was just- Robert, does this, did you replace everything? So we're even replacing the appendix in the back and everything? So
Yeah.
Take this whole thing out.
Yeah, the intent was to just give you a new appendix, but some of the pages in the middle needed to be changed as well. So for this version, we just gave you a fresh new copy of everything.
Well, you know what? I don't really want to do my own, because I want to transpose my notes that I want to put.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay, so welcome to what's tonight is our second.
While we're waiting, I'll welcome Edmund as our new board clerk. So thank you for taking this task on, Edmund, and we look forward to working with you.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so good evening again, take two. Tonight, we are going over the second version of the budget. So on Thursday night, we had an opportunity to bring forward to you, as a board, all of our cost centers, our principals and our directors to go and talk about the overall budget that makes up their cost center and talk about the overall increases and major drivers in their budget. Tonight, we're going to go over more of the top level, the overview of the budget, talk about what we consider the 4 major enhancements to the budget, and then walk you through what the risks are in the budget, and then talk about what the additional data that we're providing tonight based on the feedback that we heard last week, and then talk about the budget process moving forward. Last week, I mentioned a zero-based budget, and basically what a zero-based budget is, it's starting from the ground up. So it's defending everything that you put into the budget. So we ask the principals, ask the directors, is start with 0, and every request you have a rationale, have a reason why you're adding that to the budget. Don't just say you always budgeted $8,000 for supplies and you're going to budget $8,000 for next year. That's not how it works. The way it works is you actually go in, you say, okay, this is what we need to purchase next year. You're building your budget from 0 up to your request. It creates a sound budget, and it creates a budget that allows the directors, the principals to actually work off of a plan for next year, because there's an intended set of purchases that you've built the budget around. We've also attempted to build the budget around student learning. What I mean by that is we looked at any reductions that we could take outside and around the classroom, not in the classroom itself. That's the last place that we would find a reduction. There's always sometimes we need to cut down at the instructional level, but that's the last place that we look in building this budget. We also recognize that there is an achievement gap in students with special education, and we have one of our main investments in this budget is an enhancement to our special education program. And in a minute or two, I'm going to Tracy up, and she's going to talk more about that enhancement that we're looking to do. And then our budget philosophy is, if we're trying to add anything to the budget, we need to find cost savings or efficiencies to help pay for that. We can't just keep adding to the budget year after year. We need to find every efficiency we can in order to maximize reductions in one place in order to pay for the investments elsewhere. So as a summary, we're asking for $33,118,182. That equates to just over $970,000 increase in terms of the percent, and that's the magic number. It's a 3.02%. To give you an idea of how we referenced other towns, in our immediate surrounding region, they're ranging everywhere from a 2.4 up to just above the 5.0. So we're target right in the middle in comparison to the other towns right here outside of Oxford in the Valley area. Outside of our immediate area, there's budgets that range in the 2 all the way up to 7 or 8%. So we believe that we're presenting a very fiscally sound, responsible budget for the Board of Education to consider over the next month and a half. There are 4 main budget enhancements that we brought forward. One is related to special education. The second is leadership dealing with a department chair model. The third is the middle school schedule, which we view as a 0 impact to the budget, but is structurally sound and enhancement to the middle school to increase student learning opportunities at the middle school level. And the third is how we purchase and manage our supplies. We're going to talk about all 4 of those now. At this point, I'm going to ask Tracy to come up and she's going to talk for a few minutes about the special education request. It's not like candy.
Not my candy either. Hi, everyone. I'm gonna lower this a bit. Okay, so last week, when I was here, I talked to you and shared some information about the rising numbers of our students with specific learning disabilities and dyslexia, and shared some of the service hours that we currently have by building, by grade. And then I made a request for 1 additional structured literacy teacher to help with that very designated, very individualized instruction. So what I wanted to do is to provide you with a little bit of more detail about what that really means and what it looks like. So I shared a summary page with Mr. Hibbert, and it should answer what does structured literacy look like. It gives a little bit of explanation about the State Department of Education and the Dyslexia Task Force, as well as some compiled data from 2020, 2021. So I wanted to be able to give you an idea of progress that kids make, but it's important to recognize when we look at the data that it should be over a year's growth of time, and students enter and exit at different time periods during the year, depending on what skill set they're at and what progress they've made. So we did ask our teachers that do structured literacy with our students to take a look at last year from September through June and to earmark those students that were part of the program and to provide some specific detail for you. So what you'll have is a summary table by elementary and secondary. And I can explain.
That's on page 92 in your budget.
Thanks, I didn't know what page it was on, sorry. So I'll give everybody a minute to get there. I think it would be great too if this could be shared electronically, because I did include links that kind of give a perspective of Wharton Gillingham, as well as what is structured literacy and what should it look like. So what you see at the bottom is a table that describes elementary school as well as the secondary schools. And by secondary, I mean Oxford Middle School and Oxford High School. Okay, elementary targets Quaker and Great Oak. Now at the elementary level, they do 2 assessments for pre and post data. At the elementary level, they use the core, and then they use a Fontes and Pinnell, which is a reading level benchmark program that takes a look at readability level, reading accuracy rate, and it gives a graded quiz. So the other thing that I asked them to do is analyze from all of their IEP goals and objectives, how many students mastered, meaning 100% of the goals and objectives. So they gave me that data too. At the secondary level, they use the Gallastill-Ellis and they use the QRI, the Qualitative Reading Inventory, and they measure similar skills. So really they're measuring for sound, they're measuring for reading, and they're measuring for spelling, both the core and the Galveston Notice. So the grid that I shared with you gives you an idea of the scores so far that our teachers have submitted about their students last year and how many hit success on improving the core scores as well as the GE scores, and then how many jumped levels on the Fontes Pinnell or the QRI. And then the IEP objective mastery is also on the far right. I also wanted to give you an explanation of how do they design structured literacy? The groups are really dependent on the individual needs of the students. There's a scope and sequence that's followed based on skills, and it's developmental in nature. So when reading assessments occur, they have a feel for where kids can be grouped and the nature and severity of their need. So they take very painstaking measure to make sure that they're grouping kids accordingly so that they can see nice increases with their success rates. So there's an explanation of that as well. And then I also just wanted to point out that in June 2019, the State Department of Education began a dyslexia task force. And the dyslexia task force is going to be eventually turning in updated guidelines for identifying dyslexia, including definition of dyslexia, as well as giving a very targeted approach to guidelines and expectations for local boards of ed, as well as university training programs. So what I can tell you is that the State Department of Ed is now investing a lot of time and energy into training for Orton Gillingham, Wilson, Spire, Linda Mood Bell. These are all programs that focus on structured literacy for decoding and encoding improvement. And when we had our opening CON-CASE back to school directors meeting, the whole keynote focused around dyslexia and the push that the dyslexia task force is going to have to make sure that schools are providing the proper instruction with the properly trained individuals. So that's definitely something that's going to be up and coming. Now, the request for the one-on-one reading specialist is going to be earmarked for Oxford Middle School. And the idea there is if I can have a reading specialist begin to take on some of the structured literacy groups at the middle school, then I can take one of our current Oxford Middle School special education teachers, and I can really have them target the expansion of our ABA program that we have currently at Quaker. We do have 3 students at Great Oak Elementary School, 2 students that moved in last summer that are on the autism spectrum that have a high level of intensity and need. And then we have one current 2nd grader, or excuse me, one current 4th grader that's at our Quaker Farm School program that needs to make a transition to a school with typical peers. So in doing that and expanding, we would have a K-4 program at Quaker, and we would have a 5-8 program at Oxford Middle School. And we would really be able to continue to address our students with high intensive needs in their homeschool environment. Questions?
Tracy, do you have an idea of who you would want for the reading specialist? Like, it's not just going to be a classroom educated level for Gillingham person. You're going to try to get higher up the chain than that.
Right. So job description, would certainly include somebody that has a certification level in a structured literacy program, such as Orton Gillingham, Wilson, Linda Mood Bell, or Spire, but also possibly a remedial reading background, and certainly special education certification.
But in order to attract that kind of talent, you're going to have to pay more than you would a regular reading intervention, right?
Well, we have a current special education teacher who is very high on level of certification, very well trained. We've invested in that training and helping her move through the channel of steps. And she is currently on our teacher's contract, okay? And then we also have a reading specialist that does not have her special education certification, but her primary role is working with students with IEPs on Orton Gillingham through a structured literacy lesson platform. And both of them are currently on the teacher's contract.
Just to feedback on that. Were you trying to get at what level of one each of these are? Like, there's
Right,
a
I know.
5-day training, there's a 3 months, there's a mentorship, there's an associate, like what
Exactly.
caliber of person? are we
Sure.
talking about?
We would want somebody that certainly can be a leader in that area. So across the district, and I can certainly provide that information for you too. I need to update it for this year because we have others that have gone forward with additional steps in the training. But we have people across the district, some that have the 30-hour initial training, some that have the 30-hour plus the coursework, which is another 30 hours beyond. We have some that are working towards their associate level, which means that they've done a practicum and they've worked with a fellow or a fellow in training that has overseen lessons, provided feedback, and kind of given the stamp of approval for their certification. And then we have some that are working towards their certified level. Now, within a year and a half, those two individuals that are working towards their certified level will be able to train in district. And the intention would be that all of our staff mentoring that are reading interventionists or special education teachers will start that training and continue the training to really move forward and advance most of our staff. I will say that I have, the State Department of Ed offered some grant funding that I have earmarked for Orton Gillingham practicum work. So we have teachers and reading interventionists that do SRBI intervention that are signed on for advancing to the next step during the summer or the early fall.
I'm just trying to learn more about the increase in autism and also dyslexia. So after our last meeting, I tried to do a little bit of research on it, and I see that it is increasing. And I would think, maybe you can straighten me out on this, I would think the pandemic, the masking, and some of the things that we have done, surviving and stuff, has led to some of this, because you can't see a person's face. And some of this is learning how to get along with peer, reading over the ABA program. So some of these things, how quickly can we reestablish some of those things with the student? But some of it is induced by us, I think. Unless you could say otherwise. Because I would think we would have a spectrum of form of dyslexia, because I read it, it's like 100 layers of it now. It's not, Tom Cruise sees everything upside down. He wants to jump out of the airplane. It goes down, maybe you can't spell.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as we keep getting finer and finer and finer, when does some of that shift over? Because we have Hoover. When do we shift that over to the normal class to help the student? Because some of this might be just 3 years of not being social.
That's a really good question. And I think, so that's the thing with identifying students that need that type of intervention. It's not a sustainable level of intervention through the years. So there is kind of a level of intensity that does eventually, with the right intervention, it closes the gap. So with that said, there is kind of that gradual release to the general education setting once people have moved through that scope and sequence. So I agree, we're looking at certainly a level of intensity that's very targeted, very specific, very time consuming, but the outcomes in a year or 2 years or 3 years, usually the scope of sequence on level and intensity is a 1 to 3 year process. By the time they've reached that 3rd year process, Vic, what you see is that there also becomes a learn to compensate as well. So students receive that intervention to learn the skills to better be able to read, but they also start to learn as they're moving on and becoming more independent, they start to learn those compensatory strategies. So they're learning assistive technology tools to better help them access curriculum. Because somebody with dyslexia has that identification, that classification for their life. And it's not going to go away. With good intervention, they can function and do very, very well. But they also have to know tools that help them be able to be more independent. So as they grow with maturity and they learn those compensatory strategies, then there is kind of that gradual release back to Gen Ed. And a lot of that is them understanding themselves as a learner and becoming more self-aware. And you mentioned ruler, it does tie in beautifully to ruler, you know, for them to be self-aware, to make good decisions, to be able to seek and self-advocate. So it really does tie in really nicely.
But just quick, how many students do we have now? And what do you project for like 3 years hence? Because my big concern is, you know, damage that we've done in these last 3 years.
Mm.
So somewhere in your feelings, you got to say, well, this is going to increase at a lower level, more students that need some kind of specialized learning.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. What I think is gonna, what I think you're gonna wind up seeing is for the past 3 years, the district has really, really pushed and dived in full-heartedly to good, dedicated time to structured literacy. Whereas before that, there really wasn't a dedicated block towards, you know, that very targeted type of instruction, which is very scientific brain-based. So what we see is a high number of kids at the middle school and even a pocket of kids at the high school. And because that gap is so large, it's taking more time to close. But what I think you're going to see, like with Quaker Farm School, these little guys are starting that intervention so young, they're probably going to move through that scope and sequence, and the remediation will be relatively low time period in comparison to some of the other kids that maybe are at the middle or high school level that maybe didn't have that level of intervention. So I think you may find that a couple years down the road, we won't see as many at the middle and high school level, but we'll still see those large numbers at Quaker and at Oxford Cradle Elementary School.
One of the conversations that we had was to capture this as early as
Right,
in the process. So that
Right.
they're caught up by the time we get up to high
that's
school.
right.
I mean, some of the challenge that we have now is that there wasn't a strong program at the early elementary school level, which is why we have such a high need now in middle school.
Yes,
And we need to address that now, in the long term, now that we've got a strong program in elementary school, that should lower the number of students when they get to middle school, that will eventually do that.
So to summarize it, two things. One, we kind of created part of the problem because of the pandemic. And two is that we're looking at it earlier. So we've got a lot more focus on it today than we would have. And we know, we're aware of what we're going to be facing.
yes,
You would project students coming in with a lesser degree that can go in and out and get back into the classroom.
that would be the hope. And I do think that the pandemic, I mean, you know, as you bring that up, the pandemic, as far as early intervention, was that SRBI intervention, I think that was really interrupted in many cases, not to anybody's, of course, nobody's ill intent, but with the interruption in time, it's certainly quite a factor. I do think that many of the referrals that have increased our identification rate have come from school-based teams, not parents. So the schools are seeing, you know, that these students are really struggling with what they're doing in the classroom.
Thank you.
Any other questions for me?
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
Fix that, right? Share, any back up those. And a momentary pause while we give the screen to the remote people as well.
32nd.
Oh, 32nd.
It is Wednesday.
Okay, we're going to continue now. So it should be on the.
It's being provided. Okay.
Okay. So thank you, Tracy, for the update. The second enhancement that we're looking at for the budget deals with our department chair model at the high school level. What we're proposing is to change the leadership structure. Right now, we've got department chairs that focus on several areas at the high school level that are 9-12 only. We're looking to change the model from a 9-12 model to 6-12 model, and in some cases, a K-12 model, in order to provide the teachers in other schools greater access to curriculum leadership than they have right now. So the exact details on how this is going to be structured, that needs to be collaboratively developed. There are several stages that need to take place in this rollout. Stage number one is presenting to you the concept behind why we want to make this change. The next stage, and I'm going to go over the action plan in a few minutes, will be actually developing what this actually will look like with the people involved in the high school and so forth. But essentially what's going to take place is we want to focus on curriculum development and implementation with fidelity in grades 6 through 12. So right now at the middle school level, the curriculum leadership is done by the middle school principal and assistant principal. Versus at the high school, the curriculum leadership is done by the department chair. So we want to take that expertise that we have at the high school and replicate that at the middle school level. However, what we can't do is to replicate the same number of staff at the middle school and add to the budget. So how do we recreate a structure, give access to middle school teachers without adding to the budget? So that's why we redesigned the department chair model to structure it differently, to incorporate the middle school. And in order to do that, we are restructuring and taking 9 people and making 3, and we're condensing departments to make that happen. So we're going to talk about that. The second component of that is to create what's called vertical articulations. In other words, rather than having a pocket of 3 grades in middle school that's working isolation of the high school, we want to have conversations of middle school teachers, high school teachers. So there's an understanding of where the students are coming from and where they need to go, and build in scaffolding the skills, the experiences, the content, the curriculum, that students have a developmental approach in how they are approaching the curriculum in grades 6 through 12 and in the special areas K through 12. Having a department chair that can work with the teachers, monitor the curriculum, meet with them, look at the assessments, look at what's coming out of the assessments, the data in the assessments, revise the spoken sequence as they're seeing fit, provide professional learning to the teachers, look at their rubrics, look at how the students are presenting grades 6, 7, 8, and so forth, to make sure that when the students are presenting that they are developing the skills that they need over time. That's a type of conversations that we want to have with our middle school and our high school teachers. So we're going to find opportunities to bring those groups of teachers together, and that's going to be under that leadership of a department chair. We also want to provide great opportunities for interdisciplinary approaches. So we want to create departments that have like-minded curriculum. So when we're looking at STEM, and we're looking at the commonalities between science and math and technology education, there's commonalities there that would allow teachers to start working together in an interdisciplinary way, rather than once again having silos of one department versus another. There's also an element here of saving costs, and we're going to get into the differentials in a moment or two. But there is an opportunity to cut down a differential, and there's an opportunity to cut down the number of stipends that are associated with department chairs. So there's a budgetary impact by reducing the number of department chairs we have. So there's a curriculum and a leadership rationale, and there's a budgetary rationale as well. So the current models, we have 9 department chairs in high school. They focus on 3 main areas. One is curriculum leadership, that includes the supervision of new courses. It includes developing courses. It also includes looking at the current curriculum that's in place and any revisions that need to take place along the way. It also includes organizational leadership of the department. That includes budget. It includes handling any parent concerns that might arise. It includes working with the high school administration on ongoing leadership, challenges ongoing leadership implementation in the school. And the third element is teacher evaluation. So the administrators evaluate teachers, but also department chairs are the lead for the evaluations for the teachers in their department. They go into classrooms, they observe, and they do write up the teachers and with the administrators. They also participate in the goal setting process and the end of mid-year and end of the year. It's that component that we're looking to pull off the department chairs, letting the department chairs focus on the curriculum leadership element of it and allowing the administrators to focus on the supervision and evaluation of the teachers. So the proposed model takes the 9 and it creates 3 departments out of those 9. And we're looking to focus purely on curriculum leadership with this new model. Ideally, so that we have teachers that have an in-depth knowledge of curriculum instruction. We're looking for teachers that really understand and have had professional learning or go to professional learning on how curriculum is written. So I might not necessarily be a science teacher and not a math teacher, but if I have gone through the training and really understand how curriculum is written and how it is unfolded and unpacked and standards and are assessed, I can go from one discipline into another and I can work with teachers on how to implement that curriculum. That's the type of teacher I'm looking for that would go into this role. Somebody that really understands the nature of curriculum instruction and assessment being packaged together in these areas. So the proposal, and this is what needs to be continually refined as we go through this process, creates 3 departments out of these 9. The first being humanities. We're pretty certain that would be social studies, language arts, and more language. 3 areas that there's a lot of similarities between those. The next is STEM, which would be science, mathematics, and career technology and education, CTE. And the third is the one that we're kind of unfolding a little bit more, which is unified and special education with an element of SEL and SRBI in there. And that's one because there's less teachers involved, would be more of a K-12 feel. And the way this is being viewed, the curriculum leadership is what expands beyond the scope of the high school. The traditional organizational elements of the department chair is what would still remain at the high school. The element of the curriculum leadership of making sure curriculum is being developed and being implemented with fidelity, and there's articulated conversations that expands out together with other grades. So the question is, if we pull the evaluations off of the plate of the department chairs, we move it off to the administrators, we provide too much for the admins to do. Well, it's a very good question. So we look at the data. And right now, the middle, so the high school principal and assistant principal, those are the primary evaluators for 10 and 11 teachers each. And the department chairs help assist with evaluations with other teachers in the building. When you take a look at the Quaker Farms principal and the Great Oaks principal, each of those currently right now evaluate 24 and 23 teachers respectively. So when you take the teachers in high school and you pull out some special areas, that would become 20 per administrator at high school. So when you talk about equity, we're asking the administrators to do another building. It's not that much per off filter for what's currently in place in other schools. You've heard me mention differential several times this evening. What a differential is, the differential is written into the teacher's contract with the collective bargaining agreement. And what that says is I'm a traditional teacher and I am not a department chair. I'm assigned 5 classes. If I'm approached by administration that there is a need to cover another class in the building and it's under my certification, I can volunteer to say, yes, I'm going to teach that class. It allows us to staff that class without hiring another teacher. By contract, we then need to give that teacher $6,000 per course a year. The semester course is $3,000. In some cases, for various different reasons, the teacher might leave in the middle of the year. It might be a need to cover part of the year. Then you prorate that differential. So this current school year, there have been accounting for 9.5 differentials. That equates to $56,185 that we pay to teachers that are above the contract, that are above what they are at the salary because they picked up a 6th class. And if they're a department chair where they are contractually obligated to teach max of 4 classes, if they pick up that 5th class, then they're given that differential.
How many classes are there in a day?
It's an 8-period rotation, but not all 8 classes meet every day. And if it's a block period, there's far less than that.
So if each teacher is assigned 5 classes, what are they doing for the other 3 periods?
So one of the periods by contract is a planning period. And then most teachers are provided at least one duty, or they're provided one duty during the day by contract as well. And typically you'll see a class dropped in their rotation.
I'm sorry, they're provided one what?
A duty, so it might be a study hall, it might be covering a certain area in the building. They're basically,
All right, thanks.
you are. So the goal of this is to, one, eliminate these differentials or minimize the need for differentials. And if we release 6 department chairs back to scheduling, it allows the high school to put 6 teachers back in rotation and not need 6 differentials based upon how this rolls out. So it gives greater flexibility for the high school to staff those classes without having to rely on paying extra money to these department chairs or another teacher to pick up a class that we were not covering. Once again, department chairs are released 1 additional class a day. So we're cutting down the number that would be released and putting them back into the rotation. So part of this is from a curriculum standpoint, to strengthen and maximize curriculum leadership beyond just the high school. And part of this is from just a fiscal perspective, makes good sense to save some resources. A, cuts down the differentials, and B, cuts down the number of stipends that we need to pay out for department chairs. Now, the exact structure, we'll get into that in a moment, but it requires us to have some hard conversations with students along the way and put some caps on the number of sections that we can have based upon enrollment. So for example, right now we might run a class with very low class size. We might not be able to do that in order to maximize and cut out some of these differentials as well. So what's next? There are 3 elements to this stage. One is at the board level. I'm presenting to this concept to the board, A, to find out from you, does this have any fee? Does something like this, is this a model that we have support from the board to continue exploring to roll out? I'm presenting this. If you were to say to me, you know what, this is not something that we think makes sense, we go back to the budget, we put back in department chair stipends, and we don't move forward. But if we get a nod from the board, you know, this makes sense for us to continue this work, there are then 2 stages that we need to do. The second stage is to find out from the high school what teachers, department chairs, administrators are working collaboratively with us to fully develop this model. So in other words, take the full department chair model now. What are all the things that every department chair does? How does it line up with the new model? Where are some gaps that we need to troubleshoot, and how do we develop that? The second element is it changes the stipend that a department chair has. So we're budgeted $8,000. This would require us to then sit down with the Teachers Association, along with the board, and develop a new MOU, a memorandum of understanding with the Teachers Association that changes the teacher department chair stipend from $5,000 to $8,000. Now, that becomes a negotiating point. We might end up with less, we might end up a little bit more. And we need to still tweak this model. So one of the things that I've been talking to department chairs as a possibility of is if we go through this model, one of the things that we might do is to lower the department chair possibly that's a $7,000 stipend and have a lead teacher in each discipline that's still the lead content area that's working aside with the department chair, not released from the teacher schedule, but still having a content person that is working with the department chair at the high school level, provides some curriculum oversight. But overall, we need to develop that financial structure with the association and new MOU. So that's the 3 stages that we are at for this implementation of the department chair. So we're right now at the concept stage to see if we have buy-in from the board before we proceed with those other 2 layers. But from a budgetary standpoint, we budgeted for this model. If we get inclination out of planning out of our next stages that this is a no-go, we need to go backwards, change the budget to reflect that.
Okay, so I'm trying to envision myself as a department chair. Presently, it's only high school, correct?
Mhm.
Yeah, so, and there's 9 of us, now there's going to be 3 of us. Okay, the 3 of us are going to go down K to 12. some.
6 to 12 and then 1 K to 12.
Okay, so my scope has increased as to the knowledge I need to have all the way down the stream, structuring, the
Yes.
scaffolding down, I guess. would be the term. And so with that, how is that, I'm assuming that the department chair is going to come from the high school.
Presumably so, but we need to find that job description.
So I'm sitting up there at the high school and I have this stream of 3 schools. Okay, now they're close by. How does that all fit into 6, the schedule that I have, the number of classes that I have as a teacher in addition to that? How do I fit all that in?
Right, so we'd be eliminating or cutting out of it, don't forget, there's 3 tiers. One of the tiers that department chairs do right now is evaluations. We take that layer off of their plate in order so that they can do this curriculum work. They have 4 classes that they teach. So the other 4 classes are not teaching, frees them up to, for parts of the day, where they can actually either virtually meet with the teachers after middle school, or they could then actually schedule on a rotating basis to get over to middle school to work with teachers that way. That's one of the finer details that needs to be worked out in the plan.
But they would be going from 8 to off of 6, so they'd be going from 6 classes down to 4 classes.
5 classes.
They have,
Five
right now,
percent.
department chairs currently have 4 classes, they would stay with the 4 classes. And presumably through this model, we wouldn't be asking to pick up a differential, which would, they wouldn't have a 5th class.
Okay.
So they have 4 classes, and if designed right with the schedule, there might be an opportunity where they have a large block of time, such as block days that they might have an entire afternoon that they're free, and they could leave the high school at 11:30 or 12 and go to the middle school and spend a couple hours there.
So really the differential would be built in by assigning another teacher. You have the differential, you just shift the block around.
And there's not a need for the differential then.
I'm trying to visualize it. That's it. Fine. But I think it's good.
So I appreciate the out of box thinking on this. How do you, when, I don't understand, right? When you get to middle school, high school, it seems like a lot of people are very specialized in what they teach. Now you're crossing multiple genres and different places. And I like the connection between middle school and high school, right? Cohesion, handoffs might get a little bit better, the course selection, all that stuff. Is it really feasible to have somebody specialized, just say, history, become an expert in writing curriculum, and that's been their passion for 20 years, and get all the other ones right effectively?
Because you're not asking, it's a very good question. I'm not asking that person to be the curriculum writer in that content area. I'm asking them to be the person that really understands how curriculum is written to then facilitate that process with the teachers that know that content.
Like a project manager in that sense.
Essentially, yes.
And I understand probably, I'm guessing, right? So some chair roles might be a little more intensive than others.
Yeah.
Right, so that probably plays into, so, I mean, it's a good thought, I don't know if it's gonna execute or not, right?
And if you ask, like, what do other districts do, and I had a conversation with superintendents on Friday, and there's various districts that do various models such as this. Some of the districts have done it in such a way they actually staff administrators to do the role. Other districts have it where it's a department chair, there is more periods and some are less, but there's various different components of it. But having a concept of a 6-12 department chair is not a unique concept. It is something that's done out there.
How much of this is the budget driven thing versus it's the right thing to do, because it's gonna get us ahead in the long run with the continuity?
I see it as a combination of both. I see one of the gaps I've noticed in this district is the silos, the pockets that we
Yeah.
have. And this helps eliminate that pockets and the silos that we have. School, 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 and school, and also helps to connect those departments that have a lot of commonalities to them.
I'm trying to, again, envision myself as department chair. We put a number of things in place, the yellow green team, which I think is part of the structure. And then we've obviously improved the math course, but taking that lineage all the way up and down. Okay, so it's a complete program. And we're also working on social studies to be similar to that. So there's a continuity from 4th grade to kindergarten. So if you're a department chair, a lot of these things are, we've already put pieces in place to make it work.
And this would then support that.
You know, so those, so when we have a department chair, which I would hope to report at the board, and give us an update of what, how they think everything is going. One team is doing this and that, and we're working on doing that. We think the courses are linear and they're working fine, or they're not. So is that the kind of input, what input are we going to get from the department chairs? But it's always been lacking. I've had one department chair for 4 years. So this would be like a major improvement.
And we'd have to talk about that structure, because ideally, right now, in the job description, the department should report to the director of critical instruction, who then reports up to the board level. So we would then talk about structure and format of how you want information presented to the committees and to the board.
Other districts that are somewhat similar to this model. Do you know of anyone that is actually following this model? And we can check, look and see how they're going with it.
Yeah, as I said, there are some that have the combined STEM and humanities. Some have not figured out how to include more languages in there. Some have those STEM coordination 6-12. Some have done it with administrators and some have done department chairs. It's a variety of mixes out there.
So there's not really a school district that's doing what they're thinking to do, that we can kind of check out and see how their curriculum is and see how the process is working.
Not in front of me. I'd have to do more research on that.
Yeah.
I can give you one, Milford. They do it with administrators.
Okay, thanks.
And that's a larger district where they're.
Much larger district, yeah.
What do you mean they do it with administrators?
They have,
More administrators as opposed to.
they have more administrators, so the department chairs are themselves, but they have administrators that oversee STEM and the different breakouts, almost very similar,
But they have department chairs as well, because
Yes.
they're a large district.
much larger.
Any other questions with this portion of it? The third area of focus is work that was done at the middle school level. Back at the beginning of December, I was approached by Sylvia, principal of the middle school, that she was exploring the concept of a new middle school schedule, but didn't know whether or not it was possible, with the goal of increasing the opportunity for students to select more course offerings, add in a library into the school, and provide greater opportunity for students to engage in wellness, physical education, and health. So I authorized her to bring in a consultant who was an expert in middle school scheduling. They worked in December, and she came back to me about a week and a half ago with the results of that work. And the results of that work was a redesigned concept for a middle school schedule, which would basically create an A-B day, so it's a rotating every other day schedule. The concept is to take the 6th grade, take 2 teachers out of that 6th grade teams. One would become the librarian in the school, who is that person who's currently certified as a librarian, and take a 2nd teacher and create a computer science course that would feed into the middle school computer programming classes. Increase the art options that students have that want to take art for 2D, 3D sculpture, increase music with general music and chorus, and get most of the students that are left in the building that are not in both band and chorus to be able to take physical education and health as a wellness course.
In past budgets, were we phasing out the librarians?
2 years ago.
Why are we adding it back in now for the middle school?
So 2 years ago, we phased out the librarian out of the middle school and the high school, primarily for budgetary reasons. And we're trying to add it back in here because from a curriculum standpoint, where the students are lacking instruction from information literacy perspective, we're creating a library that's not even being used right now at the middle school. So when Sylvia approached me on getting a library back to the building, I said we can do so. We can't do it by adding anything to the staff perspective. We need to figure out how to make this work with the existing staff. So from it's actually embarrassing that we don't have a library in either the middle school or the high school. So this brings us back to a level where it should be at the middle school level.
It's just an observation, and I'm just throwing this out there. You know, when I look at and I'm not saying these bullet points or any particular word, but to me, districts gauged on ELA, math, history, and science. And I'm not saying that any one of these things are not equally as important as other, please don't read into that, but I would think that those would be leveraged first and mentioned first, you know, as a district priority. It's just my observation. I'm just, as stuff's thrown into it, it's just, you know, those are the things we're really valuing. I mean, everything when we talk about math coaches and everything else, it's just an observation. You know, when I'm presenting material, well, if those are the priorities, that's what I think resource wise I'd like to see mentioned first. Just like first.
It's a very good point. This model is not impacting, taking away from those content areas whatsoever. Those are being reserved there. This is adding additional components to the building to provide students a little bit more options for the course that they're taking outside of the core area. There are a number of steps that are still needed for this. So the next step for the middle school is to continue working with their committee, engaging, actually increase in the size of the committee they have there to begin fully developing what that schedule looks like, the number of periods per day, the number of minutes per period, providing professional development to the sixth grade teachers on teaching social studies, exploring what wellness looks like for all the students and really understanding what the impact on Flex, on WIT, on Unified Arts for seventh and eighth grade. There's a number of different steps that need to take place as the next steps for the middle school committee on developing this model and changing the bell schedule for the middle school. Once again, the net impact of this budget is essentially zero. It's a $4,000 commitment for the personal interest course, the library and teaching. Which is a capstone like project that is similar to what we've done with high school at Advance. All of this would need to go through the curriculum committee. We'd be making the proposals to the curriculum committee as courses and the schedule and developing the curriculum, and it would eventually come back to the full board for approval along the way. I did ask Sylvia to be here tonight. If there are any specific questions that you'd like to ask her about the schedule and the changes that we proposed in the budget itself.
I don't know who I direct the question. It goes off of what Joe had to say. My question is, when I look at the data and test scores from last year, and I know that they're not as conclusive, but I'm curious to know, you know, as we're moving through, as we're getting evaluations, have we made progress to right the ship in terms of the math and ELA areas? Because this looks phenomenal if we're trying to grow the arts aspect of the middle school, which maybe is lacking, but I don't remember the test scores indicating that we were deficient in those areas. And I mean, I'd love to do everything, but it's one of those, have we righted the ship in terms of started making the progress, getting back to where we need to be in the core areas that, I mean, by and large, that's how we're measured. And that's, you know, when the kids move forward, you know, as many art programs as we can provide them, it's great. They have to have the core competencies in the ELA and the math, and that's, at least that's the concern. I think Joe shares it as well. And I wasn't sure if the test scores are starting to show that we're back on track, so now we can invest in other areas.
Well, we provided that we did the iReady assessment data in the fall, or in the middle of the area now, for the winter. We don't have yet the data to analyze the impact of the fall for winter yet.
Right, we did already, I think last week, we were doing makeup this week, so we should have data ready for the growth from fall to winter and a couple for the February or I don't know what was that before. But I think what's important to think about is that we are not touching or impacting the core courses. So the tested areas of science, ELA, and math, the core curriculum and our responsibility in those areas is being maintained. What we keep hearing for our students is about voice and choice in the areas outside of their core areas. So they will go to their science class or math class or ELA class or social studies class every single day for the same amount of time that they are currently. What we're looking at is to increase the voice and choice in the other times of their day. Where right now, if you compare us to middle schools around the state or the country, we do have a dearth of offerings, right? Our kids just sort of march through, basic art, or they're interested in band or chorus. And so what we want to do is we want to expand that. And in that way, we will be reinforcing what happens in the core areas. Because adding a library media specialist, right? We want that person to teach digital literacy in the 6th grade to all of our students as an elective. But then we also want that person to teach a personalized interest project, which is a mini capstone to our 7th and 8th graders, where they develop independence as learners, where they develop collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. They have to be able to enhance all of those skills, and they're learning those in their core classes. At the same time, we want to bring in more STEM offerings in terms of, we have the Project Lead the Way courses, but the computer science aspect of STEM, we don't have. So we want to think of authentic ways to teach science and math that comes through computer science also. So I do think these electives will enhance what is happening in the core classes. Right now, they march through, they don't get much choice in what they get to do, but this will allow them some choice, and it'll allow them to create pathways too. So if it's a student that really is interested in STEM, they can, in 7th and 8th grade, the way we envision it, would be part of the computer science offering. And that would enhance and help them as they decide when they go to high school what pathway they want to take on. So I'm pretty passionate about it because I see our middle schoolers and I see developmentally where they are. And we are really working hard with them in the ELA, the math, the science, and the social studies. And we have the SRBI offerings in both math and ELA that our students that are struggling go to. We have iReady that we put them on every day in WIT for their personalized pathway for ELA and math. We are really all about the increase in achievement and growth in their ELA and their math. But at the same time, we want to balance that with offerings in their elective areas. And we felt like we could do that in a cost-neutral format. Now, I wasn't coming and asking for 2 new teachers because, when I talked to Dr. Miller, it was, listen, I understand you want a library media specialist, but it's not going to happen unless you give something else. And so this was our creative sort of problem solving to maintain what we have in our course, but also increase offerings for our students.
I don't have a kid who's in the middle school, so I'm not familiar with the schedule. Can you just talk a little bit more about like what a day could look like for an average student? So it sounds like they get the 4 core classes every single day.
Yes.
But then what I would consider like electives, like music or gym or art or library, is that just like one time a week, or how does that,
So
how does
no,
it fit in?
currently they have an elective once a day per quarter. So they could have up to 2 electives in a quarter, but some students have an elective and some students have a WIT. Some students have 2 electives.
I don't know what it
So WIT it's called whatever it takes. It's a period in the day where students, they can have structured study hall, they can be pulled out for SRBI services, they do their iReady there, they can be pulled for resource time during that. So a typical day, so I'll take you through a 6th grader's day. A period, they could have WIT or a special. B period, they go to a core. C period, they go to a core. D period, they go to either a special or a WIT that period. Then they go to lunch. Then E and F, they go to 2 more cores, and then it's the end of their day. What we're proposing is only an A-B rotation for their unified arts. Their core classes are still every day at the same time. But in order to increase electives, we would have those courses, instead of be by quarter, they would be by semester. So that it increases, it gives more slots per se for elective areas for students to be able to pick from. So, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so one more question. Now you add SRBI or special ed into that rotation. Does that mean those kids use the whatever it takes period for the resource, and or do they miss out on having some of those?
Not in the new schedule next year, because it's A-B.
Yeah.
They could possibly have a WIT A, but on B, they could have an elective class.
So there's more pathways to.
Yes. Versus now,
They miss
if
out.
they're sort of placed into one and they're there. Using the A-B for related arts, it opens up more slots for them to be able to accomplish both. And that was part of the impetus for this. Like, if you're a kid that takes band and chorus, you're pretty much, your schedule is locked in. You don't really get to take anything else because of the way it falls in the schedule. Now going from A-B, you could take chorus A, you could take band B, but in semester 2, right, you can have chorus all of A, but then B in semester 2, it opens you up for if you want an art, or if you want the computer science, or if you want a different elective.
Thank you. I had no idea how it worked.
Yeah, it is complex. I mean, Anthony knows, he was there. He worked on
It's
that
so
for a while.
complex that when you look at asking for a consultant for scheduling, you hire a middle school scheduling consultant, or you hire an elementary school scheduling consultant, you hire a high school scheduling consultant, you have different specialties actually. And
Right.
you're familiar with how that particular structure works for that particular level.
I just had one, that's with,
The other thing is you need to talk about this.
Oh, okay.
How people pick
I'm
up.
sorry,
Yeah.
I got, I looked up a couple definitions, I'm not sure which one you told me.
Whatever
What
it
means.
takes, it's called.
Whatever it takes.
It's made up. not
It's
something
unique to
that-
us, it's unique to
But this,
Oxford.
it says in here, this is what teachers do.
No, that's what it takes.
Definition.
That's, we made that up. It's
Yeah.
a made up word.
There's this,
Whatever it
It's a
takes.
study hall.
Yeah.
And that could be used, it's a utility period that could be used for testing or
So it's made up.
special.
yes,
Yeah,
it's unique to us here in Oxford.
It's not a
Well,
acronym, that's-
I made it up when I came here. But
You made up the vernacular.
Yeah, you know, let them talk about it, but whatever it takes to help the kid be successful. This is a time period where there's 4 core teachers, English, social studies, science, and math, don't have a class to teach, they're teaching with. So if the kid needs help in any of those, they can go see these people. Even if you're assigned to the social studies teacher, you can go see the science teacher at that time they're available. So the problem, as it was mentioned, and Sylvia is trying to correct, is that if you're a special education student, your resource class would be during one of these 2 specialty periods. And therefore, you do get, and that's always been a problem. So you don't get to access some of these electives. So they're trying to make a situation where you can have your resource and take PE and have health, etc. So a lot of the kids in resource don't go to WIT because that's when they have the resource class with their special education.
And right now, because of the way that the schedule is designed, not every student is able to enroll in health and physical education. This is going to increase students to be able to actually enroll in this class, which is an important class for students to also engage in. Any other questions with the schedule? The 4th area of enhancement, it deals with instructional supplies and office supplies. This is a complete change in the model of how we organize ordering supplies for the schools and how we maintain inventory and how we supply the schools. So I'm going to let Anthony speak to and address the change in the model for this.
I bring my glasses up, so I don't wipe up the sheet.
But the bottom line is that the instructional supply line item is most, besides salaries, which the principals don't really put together, when they put their budgets together, the instructional supplies is going to be the largest element of really their discretional budgeting process. You know, in the way you work this in a zero-based budget is you send information out to the staff and say, I am starting to collect information to put my budget together. What do you need for your classes next year? Pencils, pens, protractors, whatever. All right, those are the instructional supplies that the teachers will use in their classroom to provide instruction. We're not saying that by shifting, and there's still going to be the principals and the teachers are still putting these requests together. It's not like I'm sitting up in the district office determining what they need. But if we can centralize it, the idea is that we can say, okay, all of these requests are coming from the WB Mason. Can we put them all together, save on shipping? Can we save, get a discount for bulk? Can we, you know, do things? And then they come into the central office. We will, you know, inventory them. That's sometimes an issue. We know what's come in, what's not come in. I can't pay something until I know we've got these items in built. Then our program, the kids that we have up here on campus can help us. You know, the 18 to 21 program, inventory, stocking, delivering these products, working with the staff. I mean, obviously they're not going to be carrying heavy things or anything like that, but getting some interpersonal skills, life skills, there's some connection that we can make there. But the bottom line is, the potential is there for savings. So that's what we're thinking. And I gave the example last week. I had a request for 4 staplers, right? $20, no big deal. And I knew we had like 100 staplers in the supply closet at my old school. So why bother to buy 4 more when I know they're there? This is sort of the same concept. If we can do an inventory of what we have in the district, and then these, you know, and as we get our orders and we start to get supply stock, we can cut down on. It's not frivolous. It's just you don't know what you have. So the request comes in and say, well, actually, we don't need to order this because we have X amount available, and that's the bottom line. Will it save us money? We think so, but we won't know until we try it. So it has some implications for working with bargaining units. You know, are we going to shift some of our clerks from the school part of the day to help us? We haven't gotten to that point yet, but there's some options that as we try to flesh it out, how we actually operationalize it, make it work, that we might have to come back and say, you know, we might have to negotiate. Any questions about it?
One question is, have we thought about when we go around and we do the inventory, is essentially locate a chunk of our supplies that maybe the middle school is low on storage, I think they are, and we have a centralized spot to store it. Or if we bought an excessive amount of paper because we got a really good deal, we had the budget to do it, we pre-bought it. Now we have to house all this paper somewhere, you know.
That's something that's crossed my mind. I haven't talked to the administrators yet because I don't want to like steal their things, even though it's our things as a collective group. I always, people always say, oh, but that's my classroom. I'm like, well, that's the people of Oxford's classroom, right? Or whatever. But the bottom line is, yes, I have thought about it, but I think as a collective, we want to get together and include some of the administrators and how we might do that. Because if we did centralize it, again, an order comes in, and there's things that folks don't need and that they're building. Say, yes, we already have that, we're going to send that down.
And I'll give you an example. I did something similar to this in paper in Ridgefield. And we centralized all the paper into the technology budget, by that time. And it turned out that one school had pre-ordered paper, and they had so much paper that I was able to go about 6 months and just move the paper from their building to the other schools and not have to purchase any paper. They had so much of a surplus of just sitting there. And there are some resources like paper that in the elements over time, they become useless.
Right.
So part of this is to make sure that we're maximizing the current inventory that's in place and utilizing what's there. It's not going to sit in a closet for the next 10 years and then eventually be thrown away. So we need to do a full inventory of what we have, maximize what we currently have out in the schools. And it could be that we have at grade O is something that the middle school needs or something the high school needs, and then figure out from there what the orders are over time. But there's a good potential down the road of saving substantial resources because there's less redundancy out across the schools, less redundancy in ordering, I'm not ordering the same thing that the middle school that the elementary school is ordering, it's the same order. And then once again, the bulk orders, when you can order 5 times the product opposed to 5, 5, and 5, you're going to be able to get better pricing for that as well.
And I didn't mention, but we're also doing the same concept we're doing for our office supplies. So the difference between instructional and office supplies is simply, these are supplies for the office staff, you know, to use. And there is a history of us taking this approach in the district, because we did this with our custodial supplies. When I
And
first,
technology supplies.
oh, and technology too. Yeah, when I first came to the district, I was able to, you know, as the principal, determine what we needed for custodial supplies. I had no idea, you know, how much wax did we need, this and that. And so, you know, I would put down, oh, we had $18,000 last year. We need $18,500 this year. Now, of course, we told them we can't do that with incremental budgeting anymore. But the idea is, you know, give it to somebody who knows, you know, and we're still doing that because we're letting the teachers decide what they need. They're telling us what they need. It's not the administrators. We're just trying to come up with an operational system that may save us some money. And if we can pass that money on to other elements of our budget, we'd rather do that.
I have another question. So we're not doing an inventory of the current of the schools now?
We are. We haven't started yet, but that's the first step is to, what do we have? Yeah, absolutely.
So before we go through this whole process, if there's 10 sniffers at high school, we're going to share.
Yeah, the idea would be to do that inventory now because all of our orders are, you know, go into effect July 1, so we'll know what we have in the district prior to the next.
Not only know what we have, but also do stuff around it.
Well, exactly. Because, I mean, I sign checks that we're buying bins across this district constantly for supplies, and we must have 1 million bins in the system. So if we can get a handle on what we have, then we don't have to keep buying them. Share it. I mean, literally, that it's annoying to actually have to pay for this.
Well, and again, the idea would be to give the teachers what they need. So if they need the bins, we'll buy them if we don't have them, you know, in the district, you know, but if we had them in the district somewhere and they're just sitting there, yeah, let's give them to the kind of folks and try to save them. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Every budget, when we develop a budget, has risk. And the question of risk is what's our risk tolerance? And there's 3 main areas that we projected into this budget with risk. The first is enrollment. You'll find in the packet, both in the Great Oak section, we identified cutting a teacher in 5th grade, as well as the enrollment later on in the appendix. We pay an outside organization, NASDAQ, to an annual enrollment study for us. They project out, they look at the historical data, they look at projected people moving to town, new homes, and such forth. And they give us a projected enrollment for the next 10 plus years. We look at that data. We look at that data related to the number of students in each section. We look at that data to see how many teachers we have in those courses right now. We look at what the class sizes are, currently what the class sizes will be with the projected enrollment. And we project how many teachers that we need to stay in the class size in that range. I know that some of my colleagues here are here because they're concerned that we're projecting a reduction of 5th grade teacher for next year. We're doing that because the enrollment is indicating that the class size for 5th grade is going down by at least 15 students based on the enrollment study that NASDAQ did for us. Historically, they're pretty accurate. However, this year in kindergarten, they projected a decrease in enrollment. And we saw a spike in kindergarten, so much so that in August, we had to hire a new kindergarten teacher because class size was going to go up. That's a risk. So we're projecting 5th grade to go down. We're projecting us to be in a range of 22, 23 students for a 5th grade class. If class size spikes, we have a lot of 5th grade students moving to town, and we have increased enrollment in 5th grade, we would then need to come back to the board and say, class size has increased. That was a risk that we took in the budget that we can no longer say within that class size, we might need to add a teacher or kindergarten or whatever class it is. I mean, that's a risk that we build into the budget based upon the projections that we have. The other portion of enrollment risk is special education. So if I have a student that moves in tomorrow that has special education needs and requires a paraprofessional to one-on-one, I might need to hire a new staff member to work with that student. Or if that student comes in with an IEP that is outplaced out of the district, I now need to absorb those costs and now pay tuition for that student to go out of district, pay for transportation out of district. Either of those cases could be $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 that were not budgeted. So enrollment carries a risk. We do not typically budget for contingencies for 2, 3, 4 students to be outplaced for an additional parent that's to be hired. So from an enrollment standpoint, we staff based on what enrollment projections are as of the October 1 data provided to us by our outside firm NASDAQ. That's a risk. And once again, for special education, we do not budget for the what ifs, we budget for our current students, and that's a risk there as well. From a substitute perspective, we took a huge risk for this. We looked at the data for this year, and we looked at the data for last year. We do not have substitute teachers that are willing to work for us right now. But that's not unique to us here. Every district across the United States is facing the same thing. So we said if we can't find the subs to work for us, we're not going to budget the same amount. We're going to put less money in the budget. The risk is if we have a lot of teachers that are out and subs decide to come back and say we're ready to work now, we don't have the budget to then pay for them. We would then need to move funds around to then support that in the year. That's a risk. The third element of risk is increased costs. So we reached out to outplaced schools that require special education tuition. We've talked to our transportation providers, the special education vans and cars. We've talked to our insurance brokers. We've talked to our IT contractors that deal with our infinite vision, our finance system, and our frontline for attendance and for IEPs. We've talked and we've gotten projected increases from all these different companies and all these different organizations, but they cannot guarantee that those are the prices. For example, insurance, or our liability and our cyber insurance and our property insurance, they give us a best case estimate based on their view of the marketplace now, but they then go to bid in the springtime for our insurance. And last year, they projected us here, the insurance bids came out, and we ended up, in some cases, $30,000 or $40,000 under budget of what we needed to pay for that insurance because the bid came back higher than they had projected it to be. That's the risk as well. So when you build this budget, there are inherent risks to what we need to do. And the point of budgeting is to determine from a philosophical standpoint, what's our risk tolerance? And we put in a lot of risk into this budget. You could say to us, we don't like that risk. We want you to add back in, it would increase the budget. But that's a conversation that we have to have with you. That we'll probably then engage with the finance committee. Which leads us to the portion that I'm not going to turn back over to Anthony now to explain this. But what we tried to do is to listen to what your questions were and the comments that we heard last week, and begin putting together a series of pages to this presentation that tried to capture what those questions were, their comments were, and align it back to what the responses are from our perspective and the data that we're providing you in the budget book. So I'll let Anthony address quickly what these pages are.
Just off of Dr. Miller's presentation, so what is our outstanding legal obligation? So on page 99 of this packet that I gave you, the big one, has our legal obligation as far as also a comparison from last year to this year. Let me just go to that page quickly.
I think it's 100. I think
Okay, yeah.
page numbers are off.
Yeah, that's why we gave you a whole new book. So I'm not going to use the numbers in your presentation. But page 100, you'll see from 21-20 where our total legal services were, as well as our design settlements. And then you have 21-22. So that information is just there for you. And that is where we stand right now. And that we will, I believe we'll pay out of this year's budget will be even. I can't promise what's coming down the pike. I don't know that, but I'm not aware of any major settlements that we. Next question was breakdown of paraprofessional hours or assignments. So we did that for the whole district for you, and that's going to be on 93. Thank you. Very good. So again, on this page, it gives you by school who where the para works and the identified students that are with them. And I know it's small. I couldn't get any bigger to fit on one page. I can send you individually the electronic document. You can zoom in as much as you'd like.
I can tell you that it was smaller originally and asked them larger, so it's actually better than it was.
Yeah, I was thinking of making it run for any extra pages that I had, so I tried to shrink it down. But again, it's just the data, and we did talk to our special education folks and the parents, are we at appropriate level of staffing? And they said yes, and we certainly can answer questions to that, because you may have a question. Why is there one identified, student that the parent is working? And there's probably, well, I know there would be a reason that we can explain that to you, because sometimes you look at these numbers and say, well, doesn't make sense to me. And so we can talk a little bit more about that after you get a chance to.
We are going to want, at least for the finance subcommittee, a deeper dive on this, just because it's part of our due diligence. And if, the pressure comes in that we have to start cutting, not that we want to cut anywhere, but if the pressure comes in, we want to at least have a solid base to go, all of our staff are fully utilized before, because if we have to cut and, we have 2 staff members that are at half capacity, and not saying they are, but if they were, that turns into 1 staff member. If things, I'm just across, that's what I was just saying, that staff in general, and that's just, because when we know how many students someone gets assigned to, it's hard to understand, like, is that a full schedule? Are you seeing them for 1 period? Are you seeing them for, half the day, and the other student you're seeing for the other half?
Sure.
So we're going to need a deeper dive.
Typically, we go see paras listed here assigned to an elementary classroom. In many cases, they're not being assigned as a one-on-one para where they're assigned to that student all day long. The attempt is to put several students that need a para into one classroom and have that para that's assigned to the classroom that support those students that entire day in that one classroom. But we can talk more in depth about that in the finance committee.
Thank you.
So any other questions on that? So deeper dive for the different groups. The next one was about the different contracts we have, so I did include that in your group number. $102.
All the numbers were correct until we added one more page to the high school.
Yeah, so that was second. But most of our contracts, we have some major contracts that are coming up. I'm actually going to be in a training all day on Friday on how to put an RFP together for nutrition services that's required by the state when we go out to bid for nutrition. And so I put the major contracts up top. And then we have a yearlies. One that stuck out to me that I think we will go out to bid on is going to be our trash, because it's a significant amount in the state that haven't been done. So I wanted to cover that. The other ones are, we get things like there'll be like inspections for our elevators or inspections for the boilers, things like that. Water inspection, that's all included in what we do. So those are like, they're more year to year rather than formal contracts, but the ones up on top of the formal contracts that we have on file. And we see data demonstrating success of our reading instruction program. Yes, Tracy did a nice job of illustrating that, and that on page 92 has the breakdowns for it. I gave you, instead of putting it in the formal document here, a breakdown of our dues and fees for this year and from last year. The reason I gave you last year is we haven't done all of our dues and fees for this year. I didn't know, well, how come there's only $18,000? We're asking for 60. And you get a sense from last year when we had full year of work. And these can be as small as a fee to participate in a cheerleading competition. Might not be that small. It could be fees that we spend to the state for DEP. It could be our fees to have our elevator certificates posted. So there's a variety of things.
And sometimes you'll see in those reports, staff member's name on there instead of an actual organization. In some of those cases, the dues and fees are paid by credit card and some through reimbursement. So the reimbursement goes to the person's name, and the person's name is what shows up on that report.
And we only do that when an organization won't take our POs. that's when we'll do a reimbursement percent. And that happens, not. One of the questions from last week, Vic had asked when Jim was doing the IT was, well, why don't you want to fund all 410 Chromebooks when instead of you're only funding 375? Based on his inventory of what we have, that's actually, those are 375 is a number we actually need for the district, so there wasn't any point in stocking extra ones that were just going to sit there. So that was the rationale for that. And then as far as Medicare is concerned, I had a packet put together by the special ed department on, how it works, the letters we send to the families, how we collect. We have roughly, I think, $38,000 in central activities fund related to Medicare, which I listed on there. And then what can we use it for? And there are no restrictions on it. So I think what would make sense or best practice is to provide special education department with what they need out of that, whether it be service supplies or items, whatnot, since it's really coming from those staff members. There's no particular
Right,
restriction.
and there's questions raised by special education at the end of last year. They wanted to spend some of that money and resources, and my response at the time was, we're not in the budget crunch with the traditional operating budget. Those Medicare funds don't go away, so let's not touch those. Let's touch the operating fund and come back to that as a rainy day fund for special education when we need to.
And then there was a question about the differentials, which again is a 6th year. I do have a list of which classes were providing this for these matters as well.
And you have that listed out by teacher there, I believe, correct?
That's correct. Goes back to the structured literacy program. And are we budgeting sufficiently for oil? That was the question somebody said, and I won't remember say who. What planet is the guy on that put in 7%? That was me. But we have no idea what the oil could be. So what I did is I gave you a comparison in here as if it was 60%, which is totally possible. If the Russia invades Ukraine and a variety of things happen around the world, we have no idea where the price of oil would go. If the price of oil went up, so say it was like 60%, we would see an impact on the budget of 0.2%. So, we can talk in the subcommittee about what are we comfortable with. If you want to have a larger increase, it doesn't have to be 60, but you might not be comfortable with the 7% that I did. It's really, at this point, I couldn't tell you. I talked to Jim Lee about the town, he knows more than I do because he's been doing it for a while. Just to give you a comparison.
And the idea of over the next month and a half is as we go through this process is to continue to expand on the budget book. There's a change in number based upon our conversation. We'll give you a revised page. If there's additional data that you want, we'll add it to the appendix. We'll just keep building this book with you as we go. So what's the next steps in the process? Following tonight, we have a finance committee tomorrow afternoon at noon to begin talking about what we've heard tonight, any questions, comments that emerge, lay out the additional finance committee meetings that we're going to have between now and the month of February, plan out what those meetings are, what data the committee needs, what data the full board needs. We'll return back to the full committee, full board on February 8th. We'll have another opportunity to talk in public as a full board, have additional finance committee meeting between that date and the last meeting in February with the goal of having the Board of Education approve the budget on February 22nd, at which point it becomes the Board of Education approved budget. We then provide it to the Board of Finance and they begin to deliberate at the town level. And then that's when you as a board take ownership of the process and become your budget strong and superintendent's recommended budget. So that's the next stages in the process. Again, open up to any questions you have, comments, turn it over to Mike to kind of facilitate that if you want. Or you can just send questions to him. We can have that conversation tomorrow. But that is the nature of our presentation for today. So thank you.
Another report as well, another, or is that your?
And that was basically my report. Yeah. I thought there was a bunch.
I do not have. Our subcommittees, Joe
Yeah,
tag team.
I shared with you, this document here, which is the Oxford Public Schools Capital Improvement Plan. It's a draft. I want just to share this with you to get your feedback over the next couple of days. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Found out the town would like us to submit this to them by the 31st. So we spent some time putting this together. I'd like to have you take a look at it tonight and tomorrow, take a look at it, get some ideas or questions or concerns, and then Joe, maybe we can get a facilities committee maybe Monday, just to say, change this, go with this. But the highlight, just so you know, when I first came on board at this position, George took me, first place he showed me was the Oxford High School. And it is really in need of serious work. We are doing some work on it this spring, but it's not enough. The lining needs to be completely redone. The doors are corroded with chlorine, pitted, and really need to be redone. The epoxy needs to be, we're looking at about $250,000 to get that. So the Hibbert Aquatic Center will be looking good in the future. The other thing that we budgeted for throughout these years is going to be the upgrade of the heating and cooling systems at Great Oak Elementary School and Quaker Farm School. And it is a little bit different from what the proposals had been put in place by the town committee, which really focused on Great Oak Elementary School, which was their charge. But we took a ride out towards Renzoni and George Temple High to White Plains High School, which has about 2,000 kids in it. And the units that they had there, we were very impressed with. We don't have a formal write-up from the company yet, but we were estimating about $40,000 per unit per classroom, which would be about $2 million investment over 5 years to get these classrooms up to speed. But we don't want to just leave it there with boilers that are 20 years old. So we would like to also replace the boilers at Quaker Farms, as well as Great Oak Elementary School and Oxford High School, because that is also coming up on the end of life as well. So we put that in as well. The high school, they also have about 15 units on the roof, air handling HVAC system. We anticipate that costing quite a bit, about $1 million. So we'd like to provide that over 3 years. It doesn't, we have to get a crane to do this, so it doesn't pay to do 1 per year. If we could do 5 per year, it's worth having a crane for that. So we put that in.
And we already to replace, is it, you did one of the boilers at OHS and then now the other one's going? Is it?
We replaced a boiler this past summer.
That was the hot water.
Hot water boilers. And so then these are the 2 heat boilers.
Hot water to being boiler is the same thing.
Well, yeah,
Because you boil hot water.
in a house, you would be correct.
Yeah, and this plan you have in front of you now, for the most part, is the bulk of what we presented to the town last year. If you recall, the town did not fund any of our capital requests for this year. So this is last year's plan revised with some additions to it this one.
Yeah.
The heart of it is what was shared last year.
The smallest item is a playground for Quaker Farms, and the reason we put that in is that it's the one closer to the town garage. And that one, the slide cracked, so we tried to replace it. We couldn't because it was so old, the kids were getting hurt on the slide, so we had to tape off the thing, and then we had to take the slide off. So we can't actually replace the parts. Well, that's, yeah, we put a little bit of extra mulch for them to jump into. So my thinking is, little kids need a playground. So I'm hoping that the town will agree to that. So, questions?
Yeah, just a quick question. On the pool, is that a quote? Sure, because there were numbers floating around like $1 million. It's that pool, right?
I asked Joe Stockwell and Paul Maribel to get the numbers, and that's the best guess right now. We firmed that up.
Is it a guess or someone professional came in and said, oh yeah, that you're looking at?
Right.
Was it somebody professional that came in or just Joe Stockwell saying, I think you need 200,000?
Yeah. I don't believe anyone's come in to do this. But
Services are
Yeah.
asking you to give us an estimate. His only downside was, he goes, you guys told me this month, go ahead and get it done. He was, the schedule was so far out that you're looking at least 9 months away to get the work done. But he estimated that that's what it would be to drain the pool, trim off all the tiles, either one of two things. Replace the tile or literally almost recoat it similar to an epoxy wall. So that the tiles don't problems. He broke it down into what the night board replacement would be, what it would be for the deck, what it would be for the pool. It's probably almost $30,000 for the doors that are all fitted. So he gave us not an itemized, again, because we didn't ask him for
Yeah, that's fine.
a deep, but we said, look, if we had to replace this, what would be your best guess? He does do that, that is his business.
I didn't know because it was 250 to numbers float around all the
Yeah,
time.
I
Right?
know.
It's like,
Yeah.
going to the town, let's go with the right number. The other question I have is, and I know you guys are all just like the whole meeting thing and the rail. I don't really care what the solution is, but I know the air quality at the school sucks. I know the humidity sucks. Why are we not doing it all?
That includes,
This does include
It seems like it was like 5 years, wasn't it 5 years?
Multiple years.
Oh, right. I
Why aren't we
mean,
just banging it out? Like, we're not gonna be ripping apart ceilings and things like that.
no, it's certainly, I can certainly put it all up front. I don't know.
But
I'm trying to make it more palatable.
No, I know, but I think we've got some money now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hearing
well,
numbers.
I'll throw a caveat out. I mean, the heating systems will, if COVID funds do come available, and that's something the town wants to tackle with it, that will qualify, probably.
Yeah.
That's what it's called.
Have been a long time.
That capital project can probably be done in 2 years.
Yeah, and the sad reality is that conversation is around grade O elementary school. Baker Farms has the same issues.
Right.
The heat in that building has failed us. We had practice tying those units together last year because we can't get parts for these units anymore. And so every year we go, we have a huge risk that we are not being able to fix the unit at a faster than a given time.
And it's all kind of tied together, like, give an example that you have over the summertime in grade over major humidity problems, and it kind of goes away if you get the air conditioning in school and all those classrooms, because they act as a condensate. They will take that air, moisture out of the air. So then that alleviates the worry to have how much do we rent fans and dehumidifiers?
We've had dehumidifiers, we've got a little deep wire, we've done multiple things just to get, as you said, the building not to sweat.
So it doesn't
Lab
work.
secure and not have growth within the classrooms.
Unfortunately, and I think we this is the best too, is that towns will notoriously, I don't mean Oxford, in picking on Oxford, but towns notoriously not put aside money for maintenance on these things. So, here we are, we're in a hole. This is the best plan, I think, going forward to try to get out of that hole, because guess what's coming now? I think Anthony mentioned it was the high school. In the high school, and I look at this, I'm always trying to move forward, one of the problems of it, that's, I don't want to say we nickel and dime it building it, but having air conditioning in the gym, and not having air conditioning in the gym seems kind of stupid, because not only do you have sports in there, but there's time to have assemblies in there, you have all these kids in one spot. In the summer, in the warm months, you can't really bring them in, So I think that's one of the things looking forward that, rip this off the roof, let's get air in there too, So
I just think if that money's coming, I'm totally in favor. I mean, I'm not.
Yeah.
Right. This Great Oak used to be the second worst.
yeah.
It's now the first worst because we shut this place down.
Well,
Right.
I would say Quaker and Great Oak run back that.
Yeah.
Right? And the sad reality is that the writing is on the wall for high school.
Yeah.
That we are continuing to see items fail in that building. And I'm scared, very scared about the middle school, because we're beginning to see, after just a year, items break out of warranty a year old. And we continuously have challenges that we're addressing with LNG. And we're only a year out from taking over that building. So that means that we have 4 facilities that we can see rising maintenance and repair costs, and it's scary.
No, I understand.
So I
Picking
think-
on one school, I know.
The idea of floating these out there today, so you can get some feedback
Yeah.
to Joe, and maybe we can shift where the years and these funds are allocated to. That's not a problem. I just need to kind of be able to get the okay, send it over to the town guy.
Well, I think this requires a full sentence. It has in the past. So unless you guys want to prove it tonight, or come back for a special meeting. before the 31st.
I would.
We kinda have to.
Because, I mean, I hate to say it, they're gonna get it, back it up anyway.
Absolutely, but as a board, we have to send it to her and have to vote to send it to her. So I don't know how you guys want to do it.
Make a motion to put this on the agenda. Lay it on the table.
Well, this is part of your facility, so you don't have to. Discussion, so your motion is what?
The adopting capital improvement plan. Board.
Second.
Second.
And is there any further discussion or do we do it?
Yeah, just another strategic point, right? There could be $4 million or something coming in, right? And you know they're gonna hack this up. My opinion is, I would have gone heavier on fixing things in 22, 23, we might get that much. That's my own point. Because once that's there, that's gone, there's no more. I think we can just 1 year. So, talk to people like, oh, we might be having some money. I mean, this would be the year to try to go a little heavier, in my opinion. That's all. I mean, I'm not questioning the items. I mean, I'm so broad school now, but I just think.
What would you like to add for 22, 23?
I think it should be the highest of any of them, quite honestly.
Is it to just accelerate? Like,
Accelerate.
not add to this, but accelerate, maybe, you know.
More of something.
So you, the town.
You want-
Yeah, I would go in with bigger acts.
Yeah.
Get more of the other stuff, like accelerate some of the meetings and stuff for the schools in. You know, you guys figure out the engineering and all that, but I would just say go with bigger numbers. That's just my opinion.
They could always scale this back.
They have every year. I mean, so we know the pattern.
Ask
So,
for more.
and this is the only year we might actually see some real money coming into the town.
Yeah, just accelerate it.
Well, I like to amend my motion. I like to amend, adopt this plan with the correction. Including the changes that Steve said.
Like some more units in or something to hit the number up.
Because I don't want to hold this up for
The other
another.
meeting.
Accelerate a few things in, get the number higher.
26, 27, sure. 22. Yep, so it basically doubles. the first two. Yep. Okay.
That's my only, but I think it's great.
Got that done?
I second that.
I'll tell them.
Guys, telling me. Entertaining with the full head here.
It's like, it's like.
Good luck. Okay.
And I throw a beer in more after this.
So the motion is to adopt the capital improvement plan as correct, as amended. Then you're gonna double up, you're gonna double.
I wrote those.
Wrote it down. Send it to me, so there's no further discussion.
Can I ask something? If we're gonna take money maybe for this year, try and escalate it forward. We have that void in that year, then we look at either windows or roof or something else that. I'm not that remind, we know it's there, we don't want to be greedy, we're trying to concentrate on heating. So we move, let's say, a 4-year plan into a 2-year, and they approve it. In year 3 and 4, can we look at either a roof or window or something that's was on the plan that's kind of been taken?
I think we could bring that forward in next year's
Yeah,
capital
we
plan.
could add to it.
for next
For sure.
year.
Revise it
That's
next
what I'm
year.
saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see any.
For this going forward though.
Yeah.
Thanks, George. Good deal. So any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Or abstained? Motion carries. Nice job. Thank you. Okay, Sarah, curriculum. We had a curriculum meeting last night, 2.5 hours. We are, felt like 5. We have, we're working on social studies. Looking at some books that we can teach her, recommending some courses. There's a pilot plan for a Spanish book that will be coming back to our community. There will be 2 courses that we come to support for approval. One is a social media course and the other is for class. Each table is another class and it's work on
Guidelines of resources of what the teacher wants.
Oh, right, yeah, so the teachers want to use resources that are not text, that is a one that they have to use to make sure that it's answers the questions, how this is fit to. One of the other things is like the summer reading program, that teachers send out to the students to pick books. Here's a book I want to read, I recommend this book. We're gonna make sure that they're, that more vetted and age appropriate for the blocks for kids, so. So we'll have a meeting in February, back to the night, like, we're all too tired. But we'll bring our courses to you guys at the next one. Questions on curriculum? We also had a copy of the new course. That's one we tabled.
Right, we saw the curriculum for the first time, 300 pages for the curriculum.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Policy.
All right, so we're trying to fall into a pattern where we're meeting the first Thursday of every month. So the next meeting would be scheduled for February 3rd at 5:30 virtually, if that works for everyone on the committee. I have to check with Rob first. Okay. And what we have down for tonight is the second read of the graduation requirements policy. It's attached with our documentation. If everyone had a chance to read it, if there's any questions or discussion or anything you want to talk about, now's the time.
I just have one question. Are the kids working on 25 or are they all set as far as kids? Okay. I just want to make sure this is kind of late in the game. Nobody's missing out on credit.
Well, that goes into effect this
Given into effect.
Oh.
And once again, as a reminder, what happened is that when we adopted all the policies in June last summer, this particular policy was given to us from Chip and Goodwin in the model policies, but it wasn't updated with our graduation requirements. So it's basically adopted blank. So now we filled it in with what the requirements are supposed to be. So we'd actually have a policy that has the right data in there.
So I make a motion to approve the high school graduation requirements.
Second.
Any further discussion? Not all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Mike, finance?
Finance subcommittee meets tomorrow and today was finance every day.
So yeah, just to reiterate, to get your things to, any questions that you have, to the subcommittee, which is Mike, Deb, and myself. Any liaison reports? I don't have anything for Oasis. Anybody who's a liaison, have anything? Maybe something. We have a meeting scheduled.
So you have 18. Yeah, you have, if anybody has kids in school, or any field trips.
Right, hearing no other liaison reports, then I motion to adjourn this meeting at 8:23.
Second.
Stop doing that so fast. I'm sure all are in favor, so our meeting is adjourned.
For that,
How'd you do, Evan?
Not too bad.